Naya. Welcome back to Naya's Smiles. Hello everybody. It has been a hot minute. I apologize. I am back. I have read books. I am ready to talk about those said books that I read this month. But real quick, I wanted to show you guys this mug that I got that I've just been like showing off because I love it so much. You guys can like kind of see. I picked up this mug from Out of Print. I'll link them down below, but it was like $12 and it's the coolest thing. And I literally just found out that when it gets hot, you see these little marker lines, they turn invisible and reveal words underneath, which is super cool. I just have to tell you guys, okay? This is their banned book mug. And so all the titles on here are books that were once banned from being read or put in like school libraries and stuff, which is just so cool. Like The Handmaid's Tales on here, a bunch of these, I don't know. I feel like it's so funny because I feel like now I want to read all of these books that are on here. So it's kind of like the mug is recommending me books to read. But okay, so we're gonna get into this because this month I read some amazing books and I know I haven't been keeping you guys updated and I apologize, but we're gonna get all caught up today. It's gonna be great, it's gonna be fun. Okay, so this month I read 6 books, well, technically 5 books and a like poetry collection, which you guys may have seen in the previous vlog. But let's start with the one book that I'm just most excited to talk about because I have not seen it on BookTube, but it literally has changed my life and it's amazing. And I'm gonna put this coffee down and we're gonna talk about it. But this book I started and it literally took me the whole month to finish reading and it was so good and it was so beautiful. And this is a book I picked up from Thrift Books, if you guys remember. I'll link the video up here where I hauled it, but it was like $3 and it was the best $3 I spent in my life. Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And if you guys can see how much I have sticky tabbed this thing, and I'm not even done yet. I plan on rereading it again and it's gonna be more tabs than actual pages and words in this book. So funny, I always say you could tell which books on my shelf that I love the most based off just how many sticky tabs and how bent up the spine is. But Women Who Run with Wolves, what is this book about? Okay, I'm gonna try and summarize this, but just know that I have not even like cracked the tip of the iceberg. Is that the saying? I don't even know. Okay, so this author here, so this book is, as you can see, it says Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype. And going into this book, I thought it was just gonna be a book about different myths and stuff in history, and I was so wrong, but in the best way possible. This book, it tackles a lot of things. It's kind of like a self-help guide, but not like anything I've ever read before. This author, she's so incredibly intelligent. She is someone who grew up with a lot of mythology and stories, and so she really connects with that, which I think is like, I'm the same way. And so she's also a psychologist and a psychoanalyst and I don't know, I'm gonna put the list of like all the things she is here because some of them I can't pronounce, but I'm just gonna put it here so you guys can check it out. But she has like a master's degree in different psychology sciences. That sounds really okay. She's also kind of like an anthropologist where she's traveled all over the world to different tribal groups, to different people that live all over the world, and she's sort of collected stories along the way, and she was able to make these connections between psychology and myths and archetypes. Shares that what she's learned in connection to how women think and just like things that you go through in life, and just how she uses stories to explain these sort of bigger concepts that maybe if you were just to read a psychology book, you're just like, oh my god, I don't understand any of this. But she makes it and explains it in a way that just like touches your soul. And the whole book, right, is kind of about this wild woman archetype that everyone has, and how that plays a role throughout your whole life, and how that is represented in different mythologies and stories, which then connect to like your own psychology and how you think in your own psyche and your subconscious and all this kind of stuff. And it sounds super sciencey, but it's so incredibly good. And I think every person, every woman should read this book at least once in their life. I think I saw, was it Jada Pinkett Smith recommending this book on her Instagram, but it's just now kind of started circling, and this book has been out for a while, which is the craziest thing to me, that it's only now kind of getting in the hands of this generation, I guess you could say. Anyways, I highly recommend it. I probably am going to go back and read it again at some point. But yeah, this is a great book to read in the morning while drinking coffee and just like to start your day. If you guys remember, I picked up Psycho-Cybernetics, which is another amazing. I'm gonna make a whole video on just these kind of books and why I love them so much and why you should read them. But yeah, this is absolutely fantastic, like 20 out of 10. I can't even rate it. It's so good. I need to take a little coffee break real quick. Okay, so getting into the less sciencey and more fun, well, that book was really fun to read, but this is a book that I picked up at the beginning of the month. I have a vlog for this one. It was so good. This is now on my top 10 list of favorite sci-fi books, which I'm gonna make a video on because you guys know I love sci-fi books. But earlier this month, I read Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. Did I already mention this in a wrap-up? I don't think I did. I feel like I did, but that's just because I made a vlog on it. But this book was so good, you guys. Okay, so I picked up this book from Amazon because it just sounded super cool, and I read it, and it was super cool. This book follows a girl when she was younger. She was riding her bike. She was like 8, 9, 10 years old, around that age, and she fell into a hole. She fell into a hole, and she fell and basically discovered a piece of this sort of sleeping giant metal hand thing. She fell into the palm of a hand. Later scientists found out that it's something that was not from this world. It is from outer space or from somewhere, but the materials that make up and compose this hand are just like nothing that the world has seen before. And so the whole story, it fast forward, I think like 17, 18 years, and now that little girl who discovered the hand is now the scientist working in a team of people trying to figure out where this thing came from. Is it from Earth? Is it alien material? Like, what is it? And that's all I'm gonna tell you, because I feel like part of the fun of this book is like discovering the little things that they discovered in the book along the way. This book was absolutely incredible. It's told in files and logs and interviews, and we follow a bunch of different characters or people that are on this team working on this project, which is super, super cool because you kind of get this, like, you're piecing the story together yourself. And as the story goes on, one of my favorite parts, which I talk about in the vlog, is like the relationships between the characters, right? Because we have a group of 5 characters in a very small, like, Area 51 sort of underground facility, under high security, right? They can't leave. This is like top secret government stuff. And so, you know, when you're kind of like in those space movies, how I say, when you're in a confined area with a few people, you know, stuff is bound to happen, conflict, things like that. Not only like is the plot of what's going on with this hand thing really interesting, but also the relationships between the characters, which then ties into the plot, which it's incredible, and it's so well written, and the suspense throughout the whole book, it's like you keep reading it because every chapter, like, you find out something and you're like, wait, what? And then you have to keep reading to find out more, and then like it'll jump between characters, so you have to wait until we get back to that one character to find out that thing. Anyways, it was a 10 out of 10 book. I plan on continuing. I think the second book is called Waking Gods, which is so awesome. But this book definitely left on like a cliffhanger where I need to know what happens next. And I need to know now. Okay, the next 2 books that I read were classic books. I had a classic reading day a few weeks back. Has it been weeks? I don't know. Yeah, these next 2 books I have read before, and it was a reread for me, and it was still just as enjoyable. And I wanted to let you guys know that I did buy new sticky tabs. So if you guys remember, I was having a sticky tab dilemma with this book. My sticky tabs kept coming out, but I got new ones. I'm gonna go back and re-annotate. I reread The Great Gatsby, and it was so good. I find when I go back and reread books that were required reading, it's way more enjoyable the second time, just because you're not like analyzing it and picking it apart, you're just reading it for the enjoyment of reading it. And I found that I forgot a lot of stuff that happened, which is really cool because I was reading it and I was like, oh yeah, I know what's gonna happen, and I read it, I'm like, wait a second, this wasn't in the book the first time. And so that was really, really fun to like find those like moments that I totally forgot happened. And it was really cool to like, now I have a very different perspective on the characters as well. Anyways, again, another 10 out of 10 book. It was fantastic. I also read a few poems from my Robert Frost poetry collection, my beloved, oh, I love this book so much. But this is just a collection of poetry. There's so many poems in here, and I kind of just jumped around and once again, like I said, found poems that I forgot existed, and it was really fun to read them again. Okay, so the next book I read, or the next 2 books I read, were the books of July and August. No, June and August. I'm super behind with my Patreon, but for everyone who doesn't know, I do have a Patreon sort of book club thing. I'll link it down below if you want to check it out and join. Thank you so much if you do. But basically every month I put up a bunch of books on my Patreon page, and I let everyone vote, everyone who's a patron vote on which book that I'll read, and I have vlogs specifically for my Patreon. So right now I have 2 vlogs up on my Patreon page. The vlog for these 2 books just went up, and it was just so much fun. So if you want to check it out, I'll link it down there. But yeah, so you guys voted on The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This was the first book, and it was so good, you guys. Like I heard mixed reviews about this book, and I was really scared going into it. I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know. Okay, first of all, this, I believe someone said this was a YA book, and I went into it with the impression that this was a young adult book. I just want to put it out there. This is not by any means a young adult book. Like, it was super explicit in the best way, but like still I was reading it and I'm like, okay, this is not for like 13-year-olds. The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. What is this book about? This book is basically a rom-com in book form, okay? I would honestly probably put it in the new adult category. Yeah, it's somewhere between new adult and adult, but it was fantastic. Another thing, I did not know it was a romance book. I knew it was contemporary, but I didn't know the whole book was gonna be based around romance, and that's not usually my thing, and I'm really happy I didn't know, because I may not have actually even picked it up if I knew that, because it's just not my genre, not my style. But it was so good. We follow a girl and a guy, and they're like literally enemies, okay? They work at this publishing company, right? This book publishing company. Both of these characters, right, they were originally like the head assistants, I think, to the CEOs of these 2 different publishing houses. But then these 2 publishing houses came together and is now one publishing house. So we have these 2 characters, right, that are now forced to work together, and they literally sit at cubicles across from each other, and they just absolutely hate each other. And so we're following it from the girl's perspective, and every day she kind of has these like little like hating games, like the staring contest, and just like weird like things that she does. This kind of like love-hate relationship with the guy Joshua, who sits across. And main reason why I absolutely love this story is because the dialogue and the jokes, okay? One of those books you guys will either love or hate, because the humor in it is like so petty and so immature, but like that's my kind of humor, and I absolutely loved it. Especially like our girl main character, like her comebacks and like just the back and forth bickering, and just I love it so much. Okay, as the story progresses, like right from the beginning, you know they're gonna end up together, or at least like have some sort of relationship. It gets really good, gets steamy. Highly recommend if you want something funny, if you're in a reading slump. Oh my god, if you're in a reading slump, okay, pick up this book, because girl, it'll get you out of that reading slump so fast. Okay, and the last book that I read, also for my Patreon, I'm so happy you guys voted on these books because they were so good. But this second one I have had on my shelf since like 2014, and I'm so happy I read it. It was so incredible. Like, I can't even describe how amazing this book is, and like how I'm going to read all of Holly Black's other books now, because I have 2 of her other books that have been sitting on my shelf forever. At The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. I think I mentioned in my previous video that I had never read a Holly Black book, but I totally forgot that Holly Black wrote the Spiderwick Chronicles, which I was a huge fan of when I was younger. I had like the field guide, and I watched the movies, and it was so good. And I just loved like fairies. Like, you guys know I'm a fairy lover. But it was so incredible. But I picked up this book and I had no idea what to expect, and it was so good. Basically, this book is everything I love in a book, right? So it takes place in the real world. We're following this brother and sister who live in this really kind of weird town. And I love books that take place in like a weird town, like a small weird town. I love that. Like The Raven Cycle, like all my favorite books take place in small weird towns. There are fairies. Like, everyone in the town knows that fairies exist, that sort of otherworldly magical creatures exist, and they're kind of like in the background of this town, and that was what makes that's what makes it really interesting. So it's definitely like a tourist attraction, but of course to the tourists it's like, oh, the fairies aren't real, that's just like what the town is known for, like, oh, fairies, you know. But for everyone living in the town, they know that all that stuff is real, and so they grow up like, you know, keeping salt, like tossing salt over their shoulders and turning their socks inside out and making sure to put salt by the windows and just little things like that, which is so cool. And so our two main characters kind of have this really weird upbringing. The biggest mystery and the biggest plot point in this whole book is that in the woods, or in the darkest part of the forest, I keep saying woods, I don't know why, but in the darkest part of the forest there's this glass crystal casket, and in the casket is this like fairy prince with horns that has been there for generations and generations. And like I said, for the tourists they think it's just like a fake body and like a tourist attraction, but for everyone in the town they know it's a real person or a real fairy that's been in that casket asleep for years and years and years. And so our two main characters have kind of like always gone to this casket and have like, you know, made up stories about, you know, the fairy prince, and one day he's gonna wake up. And so one day, after years and years and years of this fairy prince being asleep, he wakes up, and now all this stuff is happening in this town, and our two main characters have to deal with it. And it's just, it's really hard to describe, but it was so incredible and magical. And I don't know, like I said, it's the kind of magic that I really like, where it takes place in the real world and it's just like this weird sort of thing that exists. But another 10 out of 10 book. It was so good. Holly Black has easily become one of my favorite authors. Now, like, I think the next book that I'll read of Holly Black will either be The Coldest Girl in Cold Town or The Cruel Prince. Let me know which one you think I should read next. All right, those are all the books I read. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, keep reading, and I will talk to you guys later.